Morning. It's great to be back together again. I welcome a lot of folks who are new coming in, dropping kids off at school. We're certainly glad for everyone who's gathered over in our Leland campus and all the things that are happening as fall begins. This is where we all hope that the weather is going to change. It's not. We're still going to be walking in earth sweat for a little while longer, right? That's what it's like. And but there's a lot of great things that happen in the fall, and it almost feels like New Year. Like that's what happens. Like everybody's like buying new school supplies and fresh pencils and all the things. At least I love that kind of stuff. All the things that I get to do to kind of set new patterns in our lives. That's what's happening around this time of year. And so part of what we wanted to do is, obviously it's a fall kickoff. People, especially those of you who are moving into new areas like middle school or high school or college. What happens to you in the next 2 to 3 weeks is going to set the trajectory for likely the next few years of your lives. These not to overstate or to make it sound overly dramatic, but the things and the choices that you make in these as you establish new patterns are likely the things that will sort of establish the habits and the relational sort of dynamics that you'll carry with you for some time in the foreseeable future. So these are great opportunities in front of us. Maybe if you're like already kind of in a rut or the grind or whatever you would call it, right? It's a chance for you to go, hey, we're gonna kind of take some time and reorient ourselves and reestablish some things in terms of the kind of people that we want to be. And so what I wanna do today as we kind of launch in the fall is kind of tell you what kind of church we long to be. This isn't, you're walking into something and some of you, again, this is your first time here and this is lots going on, and there is a lot going on. And there's a lot going on because there's a lot of great things that we get to be a part of, a lot of great people who are doing really genuine ministry towards other people in and through our church. And so we're grateful for that. And so part of what I wanted to do is to revisit how we began this year. In every year, if you've been around Port City, we don't pick New Year's resolutions, we pick one word. And our one word, we pick our one word. It's not a magic word. It's not some kind of, it's not something that goes, it's just a lens to help us be able to pay attention to the work that God is doing in us. It represents the hope that we have, what we hope God will do in us. It represents a lens through which we can see and pay attention to God's work within us. And so we've been doing that for almost 20 years, and it's been a discipline for me that's served me incredibly well. And so we really work together to do that in our church. I hear stories almost every week about someone says, oh, my word is, and here's how it's affecting me. So we're in September. Some of you have forgotten your word. That's okay, that's part of the pattern too. So maybe open up your app that you haven't used in a long time and look at that, or go back and on the board, they're out here. But one of the things we did this year is we picked a corporate word. And this was basically a way to say, look, we recognize that we all long for God to do something in us as individuals. We want to become a kind of person as an individual. But we also collectively want to become a kind of people. And so we established a corporate word so that we could all be aware and sort of have a visual way to see that our formation as an individual actually contributes to our formation as a church, as a community, as a people. And so we wanted to learn more how to take responsibility for that. So we picked the corporate word, disciple. And this is because this is how we want to begin to see ourselves. We're going to talk more about this over the next few weeks. But suffice it to say, this comes from a very familiar passage in the Bible that almost every church believes in, which is known as the Great Commission. You've probably heard that before. And the Great Commission, really that phrase is not actually anywhere in the Bible, but it became the phrase that was used to describe the end of Matthew 28, where Jesus is commissioning or commanding his disciples and kind of giving them their marching orders from that day forward. It really became popular in the 1800s as a way to rally people to go around the world and really launch international missions, particularly from sort of England and the United States. And so that became kind of the way. So my upbringing, that's always what it meant. The Great Commission was always go across the ocean and do something. And so, which is fine, which is good. I mean, it's not just fine, it's good. We are involved in a lot of things. But I want us to sort of look at this a little bit differently and try to walk into this a little more carefully and see what it actually does mean for you and I today as we go through the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks together and establish some patterns or recommit to some patterns that perhaps we've forgotten since summer showed up a few months ago. And so this is from Matthew chapter 28, starting in verse 18. This is the very end of the Gospel of Matthew, and Matthew does a masterful job at presenting us to us. This is after the crucifixion, after the resurrection, and right before Jesus ascends into heaven to be with the Father. And so Matthew chapter 28, verse 18, it says this: "Then Jesus came and he said to them, 'All authority has been in heaven and on earth has been given to me.'" Now, we're not gonna mine through this super carefully, but this whole way this is presented is loaded with implications for us. So all authority has been given to me. Therefore, because this authority that I have, therefore I want you to do what? To go and to do what? Make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And surely I am with you always, even until the end of the age. Some of you who grew up in the church are very familiar with that. Some of you, it brings back maybe a sense of guilt because you didn't do this when you were growing up and you ended up working in a job and now you're stuck there or whatever it might be. But I want to just kind of back up and just look and say, what is Jesus asking us to do? And the first thing we see is that he says that the whole point is to go and make disciples. We got to make disciples. So part of what we do around here is, what does that mean? What does it mean to go and make disciples? So what we did, and this is just sort of one of the things if you're kind of walking into us for the first time, is we try to define things, we can bring a sense of clarity to them. And we began this year by picking a word. The word was disciple. Y'all remember this if you've been around? And there was a definition of the word. And I want you to really quick give yourself a pop quiz. Can you recite the definition? If you can't, no shame. We're gonna put it on the screen, but it goes like this. A disciple is to live as a friend and follower of Jesus, being trained and empowered by him to love. And we did a whole series explaining this definition. That the invitation of Jesus to be a disciple and to make disciples is to live as a friend and a follower of Jesus, being trained and empowered by him to love. There's a podcast that we recorded that will be out this coming, I think, Wednesday. We talk a lot about this word, where we are, what we've done, how it's affected us in different pockets of our church. And so that's kind of another resource that you'll have to sort of continue this conversation from today. But what I want to focus on today is this phrase where it says, therefore go and make. The idea of this, again, has long been sort of couched as you need to move outside and go somewhere else. But the literal idea, this would have come from the way the Jewish culture would have understood this. When Moses was giving the command to teach children, he says, when you wake up, when you lie down, when you go to work, when you eat, when you do the normal things of your life, teach these things. And this is really the language that Jesus was doing. The word is as you go. As you move in and out through your normal, everyday, ordinary life, make disciples. It's not for you to be trying to do something different. He's not giving you something to do. It's not a charge to go on some global adventure across the world, but instead, it's a way for us to embrace this thing that Jesus has invited us to live as and to be a part of this great commission. It's a great, actually, phrase that we use to describe it. It's a commission. Right? Commission means that we are together with Jesus doing this. We are sharing this with him. And so we want to learn how to walk in this and his power and with sensitivity to what he longs to do as you go in your everyday, ordinary life. It's to be a lens through which we see everything, to live as a disciple, and out of that to recognize that our lives as we go cause something to happen in the lives of others. You know that's true, right? Everywhere you go, you affect other people in some way. How you show up in your friend group, how you show up at work, how you show up in your home. Some of you, how you wake up in your home, right? It affects everything about everybody. And so some form of this Great Commission is found in every gospel. And one of the ones that's often overlooked, and it's not labeled as the Great Commission, but it's one of the places that I've tried to spend a lot of time with over the last few years, is found in the book of John, the very end of the book of John. This is John chapter 20. And so we'll read this together. And this is as Jesus has shown back up, just setting up some context, shown back up after he was resurrected and his disciples are terrified and they don't really believe him. Like this doesn't happen. So like Jesus shows up, oh my gosh, it's Jesus. And he says, oh, look at my hands and my side. You can see this. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And this is how John records this. John chapter 20, starting in verse 21. And Jesus said, peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you. And with that, he breathed on them. And he said, receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone his sins, they are forgiven. And if you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven. Now, I don't know what y'all do when you read the Bible, but I try to envision stuff. So Jesus shows up and he says, peace. Peace be with you. And I like that. As the Father has sent me, so now I am sending you. And all of a sudden, about 19 questions start to pop into my mind. And then what? And with that, anybody ever think about this? Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I'm sending you. So weird. So weird. What is happening in this? Like this is not in there arbitrarily. You have to kind of know John. You have to know something about John. Do you know how John began his gospel? John knew the Old Testament, the Old Covenant. He knew the Torah. He knew Genesis. He understood that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He understood that the earth was formless and void, and the Spirit of God brooded over the abyss and was calling or causing life to be formed. He knew that in the garden, God reached down and he formed out of the dirt the first human, and he breathed into him the wind of God, the ruach, the breath of God. When John begins his gospel, how does he begin it? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and he was with God in the beginning. And through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was the life, and this life was the light of all mankind. And the light shone in the darkness, right? This is how John begins his gospel. Like he's writing this to move us, to get us to think and to enter into something. There's a new beginning happening, something being created and established. So when John writes this in his gospel, peace be with you. As the Father sent me, so send I you, so I'm sending you. And then he breathed on them. He's reenacting the first human. He's calling us out of the clay, right? This is the psalmist. He lifted us out of the miry clay and he set us under the rock. And then Jesus John figuratively, probably literally, but he expresses to us that Jesus reenacted this. The breath of God, receive the Spirit of God, the pneumos, the ruach, and he breathes into us the Spirit or the wind or the breath of God. And we become born again or a living being again. Like the whole picture of this is that he's giving us something that we're supposed to contemplate and wrestle with and say, what does it mean to be sent into the world as Jesus was sent into the world? And they get a whole message on that. But I want to give you a couple things that I think are really important for us. He breathed into them and he said, there's a peace that I'm giving you. And there's something about this peace that is distinctly different from the other kind of peace that we can experience when we're laying on the beach and the wind is gentle and the waves are kind, right? This feels so peaceful. There's a peace that he brings and gives that is not contingent on our circumstances. And we're like, well, what do you mean, right? That's what we're after. Then he gives us, and he said this earlier in his gospel. He writes this earlier in his gospel. When Jesus talks about this peace, he connects it to his presence or to the coming of the Holy Spirit to come and to be with us. To be with us. This morning in my quiet time, I was reading back through Psalms. And that's one of the things I do, especially when I can't settle down. I was excited about today. So So I gotta settle down, So I just kind of read through the Psalms because they're paced, they're hard, you can't read them quickly. And at the end of Psalm 73, he said, Lord, you're the strength of my heart and my portion. Whom have I in heaven but you? The nearness of God is my good. And right, this is what God sending his Spirit is about. It's a function of nearness. That God becomes so near to you and near to me. Surely I am with you always, even until the end of the age. Isn't that the Great Commission? How does he do that? By sending us his Spirit. He breathes on us and he says, receive this, trust this, be baptized in this, immerse yourself in this. And so it's a new kind of nearness for a new kind of creation. What Jesus has done is he's established something fundamentally new. And then the last thing that I want to just say about this passage, before we actually jump into what we're really going to talk about, is at the end of this, in John chapter 20, verse 21, and we can put that back up on the screen if you don't mind. Receive the Holy Spirit, and then this line, if you forgive anyone, what happens? They are forgiven. But if you do not forgive them, they're not forgiven. I don't know about you, that sounds kind of serious, doesn't it? What is it about? Like, how do we, because now you're going, oh, because listen, I recognize there's a lot of difficulty and people have been harmed immeasurably by other human beings. And when you hear that, you're like, I'm a terrible person because I won't forgive this person for what they have done. It's not what we're talking about here. I want to just sort of, if that's your story, we'd be honored to help you process that. This is not a blanket kind of idea just to carelessly go, you should just forgive them. Forgiveness is a serious thing. That's why it's in here like this. It is a serious thing. And what forgiveness is always about is it's always about reconciliation. It's always about bringing things back together. And what the important thing about this particular passage is it is the forgiveness that is given on the cross creates a whole new way for us to relate to God. That's where you start. So forget anything else that's happened to you, that's where you start. So in other words, if you come in and you're like, I gotta get myself right with God, and you're gonna try to give him the laundry list of all the things that you have done, and you imagine him erasing the whiteboard that he has with all the list of all those things on there. And then you follow it says, I promise I'll never do them again, right? That's the opposite of what he's talking about here. He's saying to us that something has been done that removes anything that separates us from the kind of relationship that we long for. And again, I don't have time to get into this today, but this is why in human relationships, when people use forgiveness as a weapon to get you to do something, they do not understand forgiveness. You cannot understand forgiveness and use it to manipulate someone to be in a relationship with you. And if you do that, you are misusing what Jesus has done. So please hear me very clearly. This is not some kind of thing I'm saying. Some of you have heard this before, and probably from churches or pastors. That is not what I'm saying. What I am saying is this, that the forgiveness that Jesus brought to us becomes a new foundation from which we can trust. And that's where I want to get us to today. Our capacity to relate to one another has been dramatically affected over the past 5 years. Probably longer than that, probably the last 15, but certainly in the last 5. Anybody remember what happened in 2020? It was like 40 years ago. Do you remember this? We have moved beyond individualism, which has always plagued us in the West. And we've really moved in, and this is troubling to me. We've moved beyond individualism into a kind of isolationism within a generation because of our screens. And the pandemic just accelerated this because then everything was online. And now You don't have to touch anything to pay for anything. You don't have to talk to anybody to get your coffee. I can look at my phone and it reads my face and orders me a coffee. You walk in, right? I don't use that. I go in and order my coffee every day. But what has happened, and it's happened subtly, is we've removed much of the required personalization from all of our patterns and have made human interaction an unnecessary part of our day-to-day lives. Work from home. Listen, no shade, right? If that's what you do, that's totally fine. But just recognize it is not without effect. It is a depersonalization. We now become a medium of video for other people to largely consume. And so this has happened, and then the distance has been normalized. Distance from each other has been normalized. And therefore, we become guarded and distrustful of most anyone and anything. And then you add to this sort of the demonization of, that's so much a part of our collective dialogue. Like if you disagree with me, you're like a demon, right? You're out of here. And we shouldn't be surprised that both our mental health and our hope are both hanging by a thread. This is the water that we swim in. So what then do we do? It affects all of us. We live with the consequences of what has been created. How many of you have tried to call and get an answer from someone and you just get machine after machine after machine? Or worse, they said, go online. I'm like, dude, I want to talk to someone. I need you to hear my voice, that I care about this, right? Have you ever felt that way? You try to like cancel your cable. I'm like, I just want you to hear my voice. And they're like, I couldn't understand you. Please say yes or no. I'm like, no. Can I, you know? And it's everywhere. It's everywhere. We also are complicit in it. When we fail to call and talk to other people in meaningful ways, instead we send them a text. Or again, please tell me there's nothing wrong. I send lots of texts, and I like text. Text saves a lot of time. There's a place and a place where, don't get me wrong. But understand, sometimes when someone texts you, you should never text them back. You should pick up the phone and call them. When someone emails you them, you should not email them back. You should pick up the phone and call them. Because you need to hear, and sometimes you need to see that person and look them in the eyes. This is not a rant on technology. I love technology. I'm just saying that we all have patterns that we've adopted, and they affect us. They affect how we relate to one another. And so the caveat is, I don't want you to overthink this. Because you show up into places and bring something. Every one of us do. But I don't want you to try to calculate, how are people perceiving me? That will drive you crazy. Some of you live like that. You're always terrified that someone's gonna judge you harshly or see something about you that they don't like. And so you're constantly projecting and moving and protecting yourself from those things. What if you could show up free? Like, what if you could just show up and be yourself in a place? What would that be like? Some of you haven't done that in so long. You've forgotten what it would feel like. Not to have to be the boss, or to be this, or to be in charge, or to be cool, or to be this, or to be together. Like when Jesus came to set us free and set us free from our sin, you know what he did? He didn't just wipe your moral whiteboard clean. He reconciled you to a relationship from which you have been created to live, and therein live freely. This takes a ton of work. Don't get me wrong. We're going to talk about how hard this is next week, so you might not want to come back, right? But what he says to us is he breathes on us and he says, peace be with you. Let me be with you. Let me bring life into your body. And that's a real thing. That as you go means you. It means you, how you show up, how you live within your body. There's a lot of talk about this to now. I grew up where and this goes back to Aristotle and Plato, where the body was like this sinful thing, or the flesh is a sinful thing. And it's like, no, God has given you flesh to embody his image in your body, to bring something to bear in the world that you actually live in. So this is the thing that I believe we have to get right. And so I'm gonna flip over to another part of John's brain. This is at the end of your Bibles, in his letters at the end of the New Testament, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. We're gonna look at 1 John. And he opens this passage, or this book, little bitty book. If you start reading about beasts and dragons, you've gone too far. And he starts off almost the same way, that which was in the beginning. Like he just imagines, he's like, we're just entering into this constant awareness that there is something new that has happened that is available to us. We've touched him. We've touched him. Like we've known Jesus. And so he says this: we proclaim to you what we have seen and what we have heard. Why? So that you may have fellowship with us. He is bearing witness of the good news of what Jesus has done in order that there could be a shared sense of relationship or community. And then he goes on, he makes it very clear. And the fellowship I'm talking about isn't just like, hey, we love the Carolina Panthers. I mean, God help us all right with that. He's talking about that this community that we are a part of is shared fellowship with the Father and the Son, Jesus Christ. And I think John is just inferring that it is the Spirit that God has given us that brings us into that place. I mean, so this is what John is, when he's summing this up, he's old. He's done a lot, lived a long time. He said, we've seen it, we believe it, and here's why I'm proclaiming this to you, because we want you to be with us, but let us know, you need to know, our relationship is with the Father and the Son. And we write this because what's available in it? What's at stake? Our joy. This is the message we have heard from him, we declare to you. God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. If we claim to have fellowship with him and yet we walk in the darkness, we lie and we do not live by the truth. But, right, most of us hear that and we feel like, oh God, I'm so bad. Like, no, keep listening. But if we learn how to walk in the light as he is in the light, if we learn how to live in the way that Jesus has modeled for us, to kind of pull John's words, if we are sent in the same way Jesus was sent into the world, if we learn how to live in the light as he is in the light, what happens? We have fellowship with one another. And the blood of Jesus Christ purifies us from all sin. We try to think of this as what we would call formative community. Now, let me be clear. All community, all relationships are always formative. And we miss this. Some of you think that like when you get married, like she's gonna become like you. You're like, what happened? Well, I'll tell you what happened. You ran into something that's going to change you and shape you, and it needs to change you and it needs to shape you. I looked at my wife the other day. We've been married 33 years. I was like, you have made me such a different person. She's like, I hope that's good. But I remember, we were talking about this the other day. I remember in those early days of marriage, I'm like, why aren't you more like me? And you resist being formed or shaped or affected. You resist it because I like who I am, right? And then all of a sudden this relationship begins to do its work. And we are shaped and we are formed. And the same thing is true, like right when you get into your new group at college, whether it's a fraternity or sorority, or whether it's a baseball team or a club volleyball team or whatever it is you get into in high school and college, and whatever group you get into, middle school, whatever group you get into, they are going to form you into some kind of person. Formative community, that's what all communities form. But I'm talking about a specific kind of formative community. I'm talking about a kind of community that actually forms us or shapes us. Like that our fellowship we invite you into our fellowship, but it is first and foremost fellowship with God the Father, with God the Son, sort of living in this peace that he's given us, his nearness and his spirit. And so we would define formative community like this. It's the relational space, the thing that happens when people are together, in which belonging helps us become the kind of person that we've been created to be. So you can take a picture of that, it's on your outlines, but that's what I'm talking about specifically. That when you're here and you belong here, something happens to you. A lot of people think, and you show up in churches like this, you show up in almost every thing that you do. You show up on a new job, you show up in a new school, you look and you say, what do they expect of me? What do I need to be in order to belong with them? You ever felt like this? I mean, this is why we all wore mullets in the 80s, right? It was cool, but it wasn't just cool. It's like it was a way to belong. I remember this guy, he had a jean, I don't have time for this, but he had a jean jacket and it had leather tassels on it. And his mullet just hung on the leather. I was like, dude, I've got to get a jacket. You ever felt like that? Because you want to be with them, so you think you have to be like them. I'm going to work at this particular job. What's the culture like? I got to be like them. And so we try to work, so you come to church. What's expected of me here? I got to believe all the right things and do all the right, live. And so you go, and once I do that, then I can belong there. And what we've decided, that's actually reverse. If formative community is a real thing, if we're saying, hey, we want you to have fellowship with us, our fellowship is with him, then it just makes sense that you have to belong in order to become. You don't need to try to go be somebody and then figure out how to belong. You learn how to belong first. That means I want you to hear me very clear, wherever you might be or whatever you might think or whatever you believe, we're gonna throw the door as wide open as we possibly can for you because we really believe that you are not going to become who God created you to be. You're not gonna wrestle deeply enough with those things apart from formative community. And so when I say belonging, I don't just mean chummy and all the, I mean that you begin, because it's a process, you begin to find a sense of connection. And you begin to feel sort of the freedom of belonging. You're like, oh, I think I don't have to be someone else to show up here. And you start to sense that. And guess what happens? You don't just get to do what you want, because now you have an obligation, you have a responsibility. Belonging consists of acceptance and the belief that you are accepted, and it requires trust. And with trust, right, that requires responsibility. Trust is not one-sided. Reconciliation, this kind of way of life, is not one-sided. It takes two people. We are building on the foundation that Jesus has made available for us. If you step into a place and you don't immediately belong, right, and you start to critique it, or you start to go, I don't fit in there, you're not neutral in that process. We talked about this last week, that you always create something or contribute something to the experience. And so what I want us to do as a church as a congregation is to learn how to take responsibility for how we show up. I want for us to take responsibility for what we bring to the world. I want you and I to take responsibility. I show up in all kinds of places and all kinds of meetings where people think all kinds of things about me. Usually it's overinflated and they assume I am more important than I really am. That's usually the case. I'm like, if you really knew. But I'm aware and I'm responsible for it. So we all have that. You have to understand and know and find out how to take responsibility for that. We're gonna do that because that's what allows us to become formative in this right way, that we become a kind of people. And when it talks about becoming, you'll know that you're becoming, and this is how I've tried to phrase it, that when you start to find a sense of safety, you can let your guard down just enough to be known. And you start to experience the beauty of formative community. It's hard, but it's beautiful. If you and I could begin to trust, if we could really trust and be trusted, what might we become? That if the drift, if showing up here with us in this place, and I mean us, not me, us, that the drift would be towards what God desires. Do you ever have a group of friends that every time you're around them, it seems to be the opposite of that? You hang out with a group of friends, the next thing you know, you're cynical, you're mad. Some of you hang out with a group of friends, you're doing things you never imagined you would be doing. Right, but what if it was the opposite? What if the drift of us was that, the things that God intends begins to be a priority? That when we gathered, we were reoriented to something. And then we were refreshed and renewed. We could find restoration and healing and hope. What we believe is that you have to belong in order to become, because your formation, my formation, is contingent on our formation. It is shared communion with Jesus. If we walk in the light as he is in the light. It is shared allegiance to Jesus, that we are going to yield ourselves to his way. And we're going to work to understand that as he has been sent, so are we. It is shared dependency on Jesus. That is what forms us. And we will not experience the fullness of the formation God longs for apart from that reality. You can go and try to find it, or you can commit yourself to try and build it. And this to me is one of the hopeful things about the church. So I just want to ask you two questions. We're going to talk more about this over the next 4 weeks. But what would it be like if you could show up in your life, like as you go, like you really are, like just as you are? There was a sense of safety. Maybe you began to discover a willingness to trust. Some of you have been burned so many times, and you've experienced so much disappointment and maybe even shame. And you're like, I will never trust anybody again. What if that began to crack just a little? Because if you show up and you're guarded and you find that you belong, and that gap gets a little bigger and a little bigger and a little bigger, and your trust begins to grow, what might your life and your relationships be like? What if you could just show up in your life as you are? Some of you in your families, your kids, or your spouse live under so much pressure of your expectations, they can't find themselves. And so maybe you need to just let the air out of the room for just a little bit. Go, hey, it's okay to be you. It's okay. You would see people just go, oh. Those of you who employ people, we do this here. We have staff who they have things that they think we expect about them. And we sort of let the air out and go, hey, we want you. We want you here on our staff. Like, we want you. We got to work to make sure that's what comes out. We're not trying to create people who talk like Mike or sound. We're trying to get a community of people who bring themselves. And when you employ people, they have expectations from you. Do you let the air out of the room? That's a really heavy responsibility. Do you let the air out enough for them to be themselves, to find themselves? And number 2 is, what might it be like? What would be required of you in formative community? Like, if you were part of the reason that people become something, what would be required of you? So you might want to use those 2 questions in your journals this week, because I know you are all like, yeah, we've got to think about this. So here's what I want to say. Personally, we want for you to belong here. 100%, no question. Everything that we're doing and arranging is to help make that as available and as accessible as possible to every single person who's here and really beyond. But you need to understand that our commitment to fellowship is first and foremost with the Father and with the Son. And we are committed to living in the peace and the nearness that His Spirit has brought to us to form us into a kind of people. Because we believe deeply that if you can find just enough room to believe that you belong, something miraculous might happen. And this all, like, the first order of this is not to commit to the church, but it is to see and encounter Christ and His love and His purpose and His intention for you. So I want us to take the last few minutes we have together and just sort of acclimate ourselves to that and to test yourselves. How do we show up? How can we show up? So Father, I ask you that you would just meet us and let us encounter the reality that we've been made by you and made for you, and that your nearness is our good. And the beauty that flows from that is that our, it sort of makes something in us that affects us more deeply than we know. So we ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus, who is our King. Amen.